Welcome to the Better Mind podcast, powered by NESTRE with Dr. Tommy Shavers and Chloe Abbott. Join us on our journey to a better mind. So come curious and leave reframed. Let's get right into it. The information presented is not meant to replace the advice from a licensed medical doctor and should not be used to treat or diagnose any medical conditions. This podcast makes no medical claims. All health-related tips are for teaching and informational purposes only. Hey, Tommy.
Hey.
This is our first ever podcast. Are you excited?
I am. This is awesome. Looking forward to it.
Me too, very much. So I wanted to start out by just talking about you and how we got connected, and also your work with athletes, your work with leadership. As we get into the podcast, I can't wait to talk about our stories. I'm an athlete, professional track and field athlete, and that's kind of how we got connected. So I kind of want to just get a little bit into you and your work with athletes, counseling, leadership, all that.
Yeah, no, I'm excited. This is awesome. First podcast, getting a chance, the opportunity to rock and roll and have some great conversations.
Oh, yeah.
This has been a personal journey for me, being in the space of working with high performers. It's always been a personal passion to develop people. And so being able to do that, working with elite athletes, coaches, teams, just talking about the human perspective around, how to be the best version of you, how to perform at an elite level. Our connection was interesting. and so, but getting the chance to work with you and, doing your journey, and I'm sure you'll share, a lot about that.
Yeah.
Is awesome. And when you start working with individuals and meeting them in the middle of their adversity is always unique. And so, when we connected, it was really interesting.
Yeah, it was an interesting story.
You made it really clear what kind of help you were looking for from a let's say mental performance coach.
Yeah.
But also, just seeing your commitment to, kind of going through your own adversity.
Yeah.
I think it's part of what's brought us here. As I would work with individuals on really the human side of tapping into the best version of them,
mm-hmm.
the thing that continued to, rise was this comment around, you know what, that makes more sense to me. And so,
mm-hmm.
And individuals continue to say, this is helping me make better sense of my world, the challenges I'm going through. That's just been something that I've anchored on. And I think, as we engage in this podcast and this setting, I think it's just going to be awesome to be able to do the same, to help make sense of people's everyday lives and their lived experiences.
No, that's amazing. I think it's a great transition because that's the whole reason why we created this podcast, and to be able to help people reframe, in NESTRE language, we reframe the way they process an experience or their perception of what they're going through in real time, and getting real tools to look differently at what they're going through. And one of the things that I feel like a lot of people will resonate with is the idea of suffering. And that is kind of the topic I wanted to break down with you today, because I think the way that you have personally helped me process suffering in the midst of my own story, it changed the way that I saw my world when I was going through a very hard process of life, with track and field, being a professional athlete, not really performing great at the time that I was. And in our conversations that we would have in that process, I really felt like I learned how to frame the way I went through suffering. And I really want to get into that so that we can kind of see how that blesses other people.
Yeah, I think it's kind of interesting, though. I think so you got to tell me, so why did you categorize it as suffering? Because we could have called it a lot of things. We could have said dealing with adversity, going through life, you went suffering. So you got to give me some context around,
That was a great question. The reason why I called it suffering, the reason why I processed what I was going through.
Because that's a big word.
It is a big word.
That escalated quickly.
No, that's so true. That's very true. But the definition of suffering, I wrote it down: the state of enduring pain or distress. It implies an active experience of hardship. I was going through pain all the time, and I was enduring stress all the time. And I genuinely felt like I was stuck in this cycle of, I wake up every day, I train, I compete on the weekends, I have a horrible race, and I do it all over again. And that was my job, getting paid to run well, be awesome all the time. So that's why I defined my process as a professional athlete as suffering, because it sucks when you have a sponsor that believes in you, that trusts in your abilities, that puts all this money into you to propel their company forward. And in that time, you don't feel like you're able to deliver on what you were brought in to do. And for people who are high performers, that's like the worst feeling ever.
Yeah.
To feel like you're not delivering when you know you can.
Yeah.
And it's something I feel like athletes struggle with silently and don't talk about, where they're silently suffering consistently every day with inner thoughts and the way that we process hardship. And I was in that cycle for 4 years. So I didn't call it suffering the first year. Second year, I was like,
this is becoming hell.
this is suffering. I mean,
Yeah.
and I'm locked in for 2 more years after this. And I was like, I wanted to quit so many times. Like, I wrote a resignation letter to On twice, like ready to send it. And that's horrible, you know? And so bringing it back to you, like when we first met, I was in a very deep, dark place of like crying after every meet, sitting in my car, like boo-hoo crying, like questioning my worth, questioning my why for even being here. Like my why was so wrapped up in doing well. And when we met, like I felt like you met me right in the midst of the deepest form of suffering I've ever experienced. And when we chatted, when we reframed like what I was going through, it still hurt. I still wasn't doing as great, like physically, because it was so much that needed to be dismantled and put together. But I got hope again. Like I felt like there was hope in the midst of my suffering. And I feel like a lot of people don't think that way about suffering, that there is a reason for the suffering. There are things to be gained cognitively and mentally from what you're going through. And it's not just with athletics, it's with deaths, it's with friendships, it's with relationships. And I feel like the way that we talked about suffering is something that can be applied to any and all topics. And so I wanted to get into that because I think that's going to bless a lot of people. And it's blessed me. It's gotten me through the suffering.
Yeah.
I'm out of it now, but
Yeah. And I mean, so first, spoiler alert, I got it right in our first conversation. I was like, this sounds more like an injury that you don't know. You're like, no, that's not the case. I'm good. And I'm like, well, we'll walk through the mental side of it.
True.
And, come to find out, in fact, you were competing for a long time without knowing that,
the injury was affecting me.
100%. Yeah. And so, but what it did though, is that experience put you into this unique opportunity to grow. Because you had to find a way to come out on the other side. I mean, the part that was, really interesting for you was that, your suffering put you in this unique position to grow. And the reason is because, you had to find a way to come out on the other side. And that's an important part, for individuals to think about when we talk about this ideal of suffering. Suffering was always intended for us to come out on the other side. A lot of times we think about the pain the agony of the moment. But what we rarely think about is how we were made as humans to be so resilient, that we were made with this adaptability towards hardships, that with time and consistency and just staying in it, putting one foot in front of the other, finding a way, our minds, our brains, our hearts, we start to adapt. With each day that we deal with suffering, we get a little bit stronger. But the key, and it is super important, the key is what direction are you facing in the suffering? Meaning, are you looking forward? Are you trying to find your way through it? Or are you trying to turn around and find a way out of it? Does that make sense?
100%. I feel like the first thing people jump to is, how can I get out of this, and why me? And I think, to my point about the resignation letters, like, it felt like a type of suffering that you only can endure by leaving versus sitting in it. And I want to kind of get into your thoughts about how our minds are wired to frame suffering. Like, neurologically, like, our minds are able and totally capable of enduring suffering even in its worst capacity, and building and growing resilience in it. So I kind of want to hear your perspective on that.
Yeah, I think first too, though, I think it starts with how we contextualize the experience. And what I mean by that is, what I say often is, we have to differentiate between our identity and our experiences.
Oh, no. Okay, break that down.
So the difference is, we have to constantly differentiate between who we are and what we're going through.
Okay.
And so what happens a lot is those lines get blurred, and our experiences start to become our identity. In your experience, you were dealing with an unknown injury and going through adversity of trying to compete. What started to happen was, you started to struggle with, are you good enough? You see what I'm saying?
100%.
Are you good enough? Absolutely, you're good enough. You wouldn't be on the track. You wouldn't be in the position you're in if you weren't good enough, right? Your sport, the sport track and field, is one of those rare sports where, like, the numbers are the numbers.
Yeah.
You couldn't be where you were if you weren't good enough.
Yeah.
But what starts to happen is, over time, when the experiences create such a visceral response, right?
Consistent failures, which is something I'd love to talk about too.
Waking up every day taking L's, right? And what happens is, the brain starts to go, hey, we're not seeing positive experiences here. Maybe we should try to move in the other direction.
Yeah.
But in reality, you couldn't just walk off the track. You know what I mean?
No. And you try. People try.
And so a part of it is making sure we don't lose the sense of ourselves in the midst of our suffering or our adversity.
Oof.
Does that make sense?
100%.
And it's not easy. It's easy to sit up here and have a conversation about it.
In the fire.
But that's what makes the opportunity amazing. Meaning, when you can continuously remind yourself, this is who I am and this is what I'm going through. It gives you the ability to still be whole while dealing with some heavy stuff. So that's that first part about it is,
that's good.
Having that understanding. The other piece is learning or understanding that we were wired for suffering, if you will.
That's a crazy statement.
I mean, but if you think about it, right?
So you were actually created to suffer.
We were. Let's
talk about it.
We just, if we put such a negative connotation on the word, right?
On the word
The
suffering.
word suffering, it just doesn't feel right. What if I said we were wired to grow,
That resonates well with me.
right?
Feels good. Sounds great. I want to grow.
And a part of the growth process, the mechanism of growth is actually a part of that is suffering or pain or tearing down. Like you understand it in a lot of other areas. Strength training, weightlifting, physical practice.
Yeah.
It's the tear down, build up,
You go until you can't.
right?
You push your threshold as far as you can.
The way you get stronger is by putting load on your body, on your muscles.
Yeah.
It tears down your muscles.
Yeah.
Your muscles adapt, repair, and strengthen stronger because it's now responding to having to lift this capacity that it's experienced that it wasn't ready for, but the constant exposure is giving it the ability to adapt
And get ready for
and to
it.
get ready. And so your muscles tear down, they suffer. If we actually looked at what we're doing to our bodies in training, our bodies are like, what are you doing? Right? But over time, on the other side of the training, think of it like training, on the other side of the training, we get stronger and have more of an ability to lift the load. And so I think, understanding that, listen, we were wired to come out the other side is super important.
Yeah. I mean, so what you're saying is that we were created to grow through what we go through
100%.
and separating identity from experience, which is so profound because in so much of what anyone does, whether it's work, CEOs, athletes, the everyday mom who gets wrapped up in the identity of being just a mom and forgets about all the other things that they enjoyed so much. Like, it's in every single thing that people are doing daily where we take on, like you said earlier, our identity becomes what we do and how it's going.
Right.
Instead of locking in on, and we've talked about this before, like remembering like how we're created and how we were wired to adapt, change, and that what we go through isn't something that keeps us stuck, but it's supposed to help us grow. And I remember so many times you'd be like, yeah, I knew we were going to be straight. Like, you talked to me about you and your wife, and which Tamika, you guys will meet at some point. I don't know why I just said that, but like thinking about relationship podcasts in my head. You talked with me about your wife and how you and her got married super young.
Yeah.
And the confidence that you carried for the both of you guys, despite what everyone else was saying about your relationship and getting married young. And you were able to keep her anchored in confidence about what we're going through is something that doesn't work outside of what's happening
No precedent.
here.
Right. Yeah.
And that is the mindset that I feel like applies to the everyday. It's like, how locked in are you with who you are?
Yeah.
And what you were created to do? Because if you're not, it will show when adversity shows up.
I mean, you're spot on. And when you know who you are and you hold on to that, right? It allows you to separate the two in these experiences, right? This is the life load that I'm going through. The part that is also important to understand is we were built to handle unexpected levels of life's load. That's why the adaptation part is there. We were wired because we don't know what tomorrow is going to bring. We don't know how heavy the lift is going to be tomorrow, 3 days from now, right?
Yeah.
So we were built as humans with this preparation of increased capacity that we don't understand. The first part of that experience becomes that shock, like that shock to the system. Like, this is a lot. This feels like too much. And
boy, does it feel like way too
right.
much.
And so, but like we've built some things in, sport that like it's funny how they apply to life. I just think, it's just natural how we do that. And
Natural how we do what?
build these frameworks in sports that apply spot on to everyday life.
The frameworks we apply in sports apply to the everyday life as well, and we don't recognize the pattern very well.
We don't see it. Like in in weightlifting, when you're doing heavy weightlifting, what do you or who do you typically have with you in preparation of lifting the weight?
Your coach.
Your coach is there to watch you, make sure you're doing it correctly. What do we refer to the teammate that's there when you're lifting heavy weight? What do we call them?
Spotter.
Spotter. What's the purpose of the spotter?
To make sure you don't overdo the load and die under the weights.
Now, exactly. So now let's apply that to life.
Okay.
We should understand there are times when we're about to lift some heavy weight, knowingly or unexpectedly,
Yeah.
that naturally we should have spotters, individuals in our lives to help us make sure we can lift the weight. And if they sense at any time, right, that the weight is too heavy or there's assistance needed, their job is to step in and help manage the load, right? That's how we should be looking at it in life. And sometimes, we've gotten a stigma around help in life that as high performers, especially when you're talking about, weight training, because essentially that's what life is. Life is the human version of weight training. You go into every day with a certain level of human strength.
Sometimes that strength is going to be absolutely loaded.
Right? And
Wait, yeah.
and you don't know what your expected load is. If you can lift it, great, you got stronger that day. But what if it's a significant load? What if you're dealing with an injury, a loss of the family struggles, right? Transition challenges, grief, right? The thought process is we seem weak, right, if we ask for help or if we open ourselves up, we feel vulnerable. We don't feel like that when we're getting under heavy weight.
No,
we're like, hey, wait, where, hey, you got me?
Right, because I'm about to go under this thing.
I'm about to do this, but you got me though, right? That spotter is a part of the confidence. It's a part of the framework that gives you the confidence to go do it, right? And so when we're talking about this idea of suffering, it's super important for us to, one, understand we were wired for it, but two, there's natural frameworks that we got to continue to apply.
Yeah.
Right? As humans, if load is abnormal, you have someone there to help you with the lift.
Yeah.
A coach, a friend, a therapist, right? We should be going through life with spotters, a spouse. Why? Because we'll know we're living today. And if as long as you got spotters.
Got my 6, you got mine.
I'm ready. That's how, me and Mika, I will not say Tamika my life on for my wife on the podcast. I will not call her by her formal name.
Right. That's not what you call her typically.
So it would be super weird. So I will say Mika, and that's referencing my amazing wife, Tamika.
Yes. Thank you for the context.
And so, yeah. But that's been our thing. Is like, we'll be celebrating 30 years of marriage coming up this next year.
Woo.
Married since we were 18 years old, started dating in 9th grade, got married in the 12th grade, right? Like we were rocking our wedding rings at homecoming. Like insane. But here's why. People thought it was crazy.
Right.
What it was for me was I recognized when we got together, life's load got so light. So I literally felt like I can lift life all day with you. Like this is going to be easy. The rest of the world was like, you're kids. You're so young. You haven't experienced life. No, I had experienced a lot of load very early in my life, and I know what it felt like. When we found each other, she became this spotter. She became this person that naturally helped me lift the load in my everyday life. So it was like, this feels like I can do life well now. And you're not going anywhere. So we're gonna
and we're stuck.
We're gonna go do this thing. Like,
that's good.
And so if you ask individuals who have found a mental coach, executive coach, have great locked in friends, they'll tell you, like, once we get into my own personal experience, being able to talk, with adversity and in sport, and, Mika was the essential piece of me coming through it. Right. But it was never in my mind a thought of, you're not going to do this. It was, how do we get through it? Because through it is the completion.
That's where the prize is.
That's where it is. Right.
That's where the growth is.
If you go through hard things, you go through hardships, on the other side, you're stronger. And that's the part where our mindsets have to be not, if you shift your attention to the pain of the moment, that's going to become problematic.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But if you see it in its totality, like, there's a point at which I'm coming out of this on the other side stronger. So my goal is to find a way to get through this moment, season, suffering, adversity, because I know I'm going to be stronger on the other side.
Clap, claps, and tap, taps.
I don't know if I'm too old enough to know what's going on right now. Got it.
I mean, I don't expect, but maybe at one point we can. Anyways. No, I mean, I think that was awesome. And I think that's an awesome segue. There's so many things I'm so excited to get into and to talk about on this podcast. And that's the whole point about this podcast, is to really help people make sense of what they're going through.
Yeah.
And to better their process, better their minds. And I think there's so much that we just unpacked in this our first episode, that I'm like, oh, there's just so much to build off of here. And I really am excited for what that's going to look like for us. And so I'm so excited for our next episode. I think some of the key takeaways that I got from this is, we have to separate our identity from our experience. And also how important it is to have a team to help you grow through the suffering that you were wired to process and to grow from. And I think once we continue to talk about that, unpack that, and really provide like practical tools for people to take away, like, that's going to be something that I think will really help someone shift their perspective of why they're going through it, and to see it as, okay, the weight just got loaded. Clearly my coach thinks I'm good enough to do this.
Yeah.
Like, let's go.
Let's lock in. Let's lock in. Let's find a way. Find a spotter if you don't have one. Find a hype man or woman or person. And
don't lose yourself in the process of
absolutely
taking the weight. This is a good conversation, Tommy.
No, I think it's a great conversation. It's a great way to. You jumped off in the deep end anyway. Like,
I know.
Let's talk about suffering.
I knew you'd be like.
Yeah, let's make sure people do not want to come back after the first podcast.
I know, like, ew, suffering.
They're like, if this is 1, where is 9 going to be? Right?
I mean, we're going deep. We're trying to help you get better.
Listeners, viewers, and just stay with us. It gets easier. It gets better.
Easier. Yeah.
That's going to be our phrase. It gets better.
It gets better.
But I think this has been awesome. I think it's going to be great. We want to provide people with a unique way of being able to make sense of their world. And I think we'll be able to do that in a pretty cool, relevant way that can add value to people's lives. So I'm looking forward to this journey on this podcast. I think it's going to be awesome.
That was our first episode. We are so excited for what is to come. Stay tuned for our next episode that will be dropping on July 21st. And we are so excited to dive into that topic. So excited for what we're talking about. Tommy, this was wonderful.
This was awesome.
If this episode from the Better Mind podcast hit home for you, resonated with you, or you just want to support us, please leave us a review about how the Better Mind podcast helped you get better today. You can also support the Better Mind podcast by downloading the NESTRE app. There are so many tools like the daily brain training workouts to directly train functions of your brain, like memory, focus. There are also mental framing tools and guides to help you step by step on the journey to a better mind. This is the Better Mind podcast, powered by NESTRE, with Dr. Tommy Shavers and Chloe Abbott, where a better mind starts here. Let's go.